West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
How many weeks, days, hours need to pass before we start fighting in earnest for our democracy? And I mean really putting up a fight, making noise and giving it the urgency its fragile position deserves. And I ask because we are already past the point of hand-wringing. And bipartisanship, yeah, that fantasy ship has sailed. We, right now, tonight, are at the point where the big lie is positioned to hijack our democracy by 2022. With Trump emerging, albeit with wrinkled thighs, a incoherent mind, and maybe even an adult diaper, back on the campaign trail, under the banner of Stop the Steal. With his partisans having positioned themselves in state governments and in the United States Congress to help him pull off in 2024 what he and the January 6th insurrectionists tried, stealing the election. Stop the Steal is the insurrectionist Republicans' banner. Democrats, what's yours? Because seriously, there are plenty of folks who are terrified by what we're seeing and frankly baffled by the Democrats' weirdly cordial response. You'd think in the face of actual autocracy that things would feel a little more hands-on. And it isn't just me or my friends who are saying this. People who are famous for their conservative beliefs and who have devoted their entire careers to promoting democracy abroad, including in some ways I personally have opposed in the past, they are saying it too. People like Max Boot and Jennifer Rubin and David Frum are out here sending out SOS calls saying, America, wake up, because their former political party is about to steal our democracy right out from under our noses. We've got democracy scholars, 100 of them, signing a public statement saying that American democracy is in grave danger and that suspending the filibuster to pass voting rights is vital to ensuring that we continue to be a democratic republic. And if that's not enough, listen to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in an interview from 1963, raising the same alarms when senators back then were dithering on passing federal legislation to protect civil rights and voting rights.
The tragedy is that we have a Congress with a Senate that has a minority of misguided senators who will use the filibuster to keep the majority of people from even voting. They won't let the majority of senators vote. And certainly they wouldn't want the majority of people to vote because they know they do not represent the majority of the American people. In fact, they represent in their own states a very small minority.
Did you hear that? That was 58 years ago. And we defied the odds because eventually the filibusters failed. And after 2 more years of struggle and racist violence, we finally got a Voting Rights Act. And yet now we're reliving the past, verbatim. Who else needs to say it for Democratic leaders to proclaim that this is a state of emergency? You can't say that you weren't warned. Enter West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, who this weekend officially crushed any chance that we can save voting rights at the federal level ahead of the 2022 election.
voting is the bedrock of our democracy. An open, fair, secured voting. We used to go around the world and explain and show and observe voting procedures in a democracy. And now if we can't practice what we preach, and we're going to basically do an overhaul, an 800-page overhaul of the voting rights, or what we call For the People Act. I think there's a lot of great things I agree in that piece of legislation, but there's an awful lot of things that basically don't pertain directly to voting.
Well, we sent Manchin's office a list of questions to find out what he specifically objects to in the For the People Act, and if he agreed that our democracy is in danger. His office has not responded. Joining me now is Nancy Maclean, historian and author of Democracy in Chains. And Nancy, thank you for being here. I interviewed you for my book, as a matter of fact, because I read Democracy in Chains. It scared the hell out of me. But as we say on this show, scaring is caring. I think it's important for people to be real. That last thing that Joe Manchin said about, you can't pass a bill without bipartisan support that changes our democracy. The 14th Amendment to the Constitution, 33 Republicans voted in favor, 0 Democrats voted in favor. The 15th Amendment to the Constitution, 39 in favor, 0 Democrats in favor, because those were the bills that essentially gave citizenship and voting rights to the formerly enslaved. No Democrats voted for that. They were the conservative party at the time. The Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, again, 36 in favor. They were all Republicans, 0 Democrats in favor. None of those are bipartisan. As an historian, what do you make of Joe Manchin's claim there?
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, he is really living in a past that doesn't exist anymore. It would be lovely to have bipartisanship, but this Republican Party has shown us for certainly over the last decade that they will do nothing in a bipartisan way. I think the problem is that Senator Manchin, and unfortunately I think some other Democratic elected officials, really have not fully come to grips with the fact that there is no more Republican Party in the way that people understood that party, that many people voted for it for the years as a normal major party in our system. What has happened is that the major arch-right donors, most famously the Koch network, have so transformed the party and have so brought it to heel with their agenda, partly through putting in dark money to elections and rewarding those who comply and penalizing those who don't, and also by arousing the Republican base voters with a steady diet of identity agitation, of misinformation, etc. And so, there is the constant barrage of noise, and I think he needs some of his colleagues to go and walk him through connecting the dots, that this is not an isolated instance. On measure after measure, we now have 2 ideological parties, but every political scientist and scholar who studies this will tell you that the Republicans are the most polarized, the most extreme, the most resistant to factual evidence, and that they will not cooperate on anything. They have shown that most dramatically with their refusal to support an investigation into the most serious attack on our Capitol since the Civil War. Now, a party that will not do that, a party that has shown in state after state and nationally that they believe the only way they can win now is to suppress the vote, a party like that is not going to vote for any kind of voting rights. So he's living in a dream world that no longer exists.
Exactly, and none of them are going to vote for the the John Lewis. You can call that thing John Lewis and Dr. Martin Luther King Act. None of them are voting for it, Joe Manchin. Right, but I want you touched on something I think is very important. Manchin said that he doesn't support everything in the bill. He wouldn't tell us on this show what it is he doesn't support. But I suspect the parts that he doesn't support, and that Kristen Sinema and some of the others don't support, are the stuff the Chamber of Commerce doesn't like. The Chamber of Commerce is supportive of both Manchin and Sinema and some other Democrats, these Chamber of Commerce Democrats. And you talked about the Koch brothers. There was a great piece in the New Yorker about how the Koch brothers have gone all out to stop this bill, to stop the For the People Act. Not just because they don't like voting rights. And you can explain to us why these super rich, mega rich people don't like people to vote, but they also don't like the end of dark money. Dark money is in this bill too. Explain what these super rich people really want.
What these super rich people really want is something so frightening that they understandably do not ask for it by name, but instead they have operated by stealth for years now, steadily rigging the rules of our democracy until we are at the point now where I think about it almost as a noose. There are so many threads in the noose on our democracy now that it's almost impossible to count them. You know, you can start with the destruction of collective bargaining power for public sector employees begun by Scott Walker in 2011, move on to the voter suppression bills that, you know, there were 180 of them in 2013, the worst gerrymander that we've ever seen in our political history, the most sophisticated gerrymander that enabled this Project Red Map to take control of over 30 state capitals, and the court effort to use dark money to get Supreme Court justices confirmed, like Brett Kavanaugh, like Amy Coney Barrett, like John Roberts. You know, all of this has been extremely coordinated on the right. It's part of a very, very interwoven long-term strategy. And until we understand that strategy, we're shadowboxed. Because we cannot look at any of these issues in isolation, whether it's the voter suppression or the attempts to make it so that state legislatures can count the vote however they choose, or the efforts to undermine the independent judiciary in states like mine, North Carolina. All of these things are part of an integrated strategy that is slowly shackling and strangling democracy. And we need figures like Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema to understand that that's how much is at stake. I will say people should be aware, too, that the Koch-backed right is up in Joe Manchin's grill in his home state. Right?
100%.
I mean, American Prosperity is organizing, Heritage busting people from surrounding states, running constant ads. So they are really going after him and Kristen Sinema to try to make sure that they don't support Democratic priorities.
There you go. And that is the piece that I needed people to understand. And that is why I wanted to talk to you. Nancy Maclean, thank you very much.
It is Tuesday, the 8th of June of 2021. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. You know, it always has. And it always will. Well, two big stories coming out. It looks like ProPublica has released what is being called a treasure trove of IRS filings of the richest people in America. And apparently they either pay little to no tax. And that is why we can't have Medicare for all. It's why we can't have universal education free. Can't have it. Because there are some people who are not paying their fair share. In fact, they're not paying at all. Reap all the benefits. Talk about the rest of us living in austerity. Have you ever found a rich guy like Bezos living in austerity? Nope. Though he is going to get on Amazon's first manned spacecraft and fly it into orbit, he hopes. You know, rockets do blow up, on the pad. So I guess he's going to prove that the product works, and what better way to prove it than to try it yourself? I've actually been somewhat of a proponent of that. You know, there was a biologist, medical doctor back in the day by the name of John C. Lilly. He wrote the research on dolphins, among other things, too. But he was a proponent of what's known as the experiential part of science, and that's when the scientist, when testing out a cure for cancer, would give himself or herself, but back in the day it was mostly himself, cancer, and then try the cure on himself experientially. But I don't know. I don't know if I want to be part of the experiential experience then, do I? Oh, also, it looks like not only has ProPublica come out with this big story on tax filings of the rich and infamous, But looks like also a big story coming out of these Russian honeypots. Oh, invading Silicon Valley. Oh, and spreading influence and money around. Oh, so that explains why I continue to be suspended for the most innocuous things. I always thought it was a Russian plot, and now it turns out to be correct. Okay. Well, I tried to trademark the term "I told you so." I've been putting the trademark symbol on it just to, pre-claim it. But I told you so. I know that Driftglass said I told you so too. And what's up with Driftglass being permanently banned? How is that possible? Driftglass? Okay, well, he might be back under some other moniker, possibly, but we can't really be sure now, can we? Can we? Anyway, why is Driftglass permanently banned? Why would Twitter do that? I feel like I've been damn lucky, but, maybe they figure, hey, we got Zuckerberg dealing with this guy. He's a nobody. Let's go after this guy, Driftglass. He's somebody. And Twitter took on taking out Driftglass. They took out Rebecca Jones, the scientist from Florida who has whistleblower status. The Atlantic did a big interview and cover story on her. Or not a cover story necessarily. Was she on the cover? Anyway, a feature is what I'm trying to say. I need more coffee. And Rebecca Jones shared that Atlantic story apparently with too many people, and the AI on Twitter said this is spam and suspended her. And immediately DeSantis came out and said she got what she deserved, not knowing what the hell was up. Okay. Now, I don't know if she's been reinstated, but it is curious that the woman who exposed the crimes of DeSantis being muted, essentially. Oh, you want to be a whistleblower? Just try blowing the whistle. No one's going to hear. Yep, if you're in the forest on Twitter and you blow that whistle, will anybody really hear it if you've been suspended? No one will. So that is interesting too. But I wanted to get back to this honeypot effort by the Russians in Silicon Valley. Because we know that the CEO from Overstock got caught up. And we know a few others, too. The NRA is an obvious mark. Useful idiots? Or did they become assets? I think they might have become actual assets. So we have our work cut out for us, don't we? Yes, we do. And we have not just Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema. They're the public face of the rot from within, because apparently there's enough Democratic senators who don't want to say anything and let just Joe and Kristen take the heat. But I would also add that there are 50 senators on the other side. Are there 50? Maybe not. 49, 48. There's a bunch of Republican senators who won't do diddly. And yet, we put the onus on Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema. It has been argued, of course, that if Joe Manchin bolts, or Sinema bolts, and joins the other side for real, Mitch McConnell is Speaker of the House again. So maybe we don't want to offend them too much, because they have us by the you-know-what. And they know it. They do. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, of course, at the top, on Joy's show, historian Nancy Maclean said that Joe Manchin is living in a dream world that no longer exists. I would think that to some folks, that dream world was a nightmare. And that nightmare still exists. I just got to say. On the rest of the menu, the Colonial Pipeline chief executive will testify before Congress today, just as the Justice Department recovered most of the money from that ransomware attack. Yeah. Chuck Schumer will recommend that President Joe Biden nominate 2 prominent voting rights attorneys to serve as federal judges. Yeah, we're going to pack the courts with 2 of them. 2. And Amtrak has restored its long-distance routes after emergency funding from Congress. It's about time, too. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where a Salvadoran woman was freed from jail after serving almost a third of a 30-year abortion sentence. And she didn't even have an abortion. And a global crackdown on organized crime resulted from a high-tech U.S.-Australia sting. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of that chat room link, across the page to the left, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink and send the amount of those funds to us once a month, we'll pool those funds with what we already have in our own wallets, and then we pay our bills, fly under the radar, and continue this resistance broadcasting against the Nazi takeover of America. How far we've come, or have we come very far after all? Anyway, thank you for allowing us to fulfill our civic duty. Your generosity has allowed that, and we are very, very grateful. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, go to @NetrootsRadio on Twitter. That's taken care of by Tom, and we thank Tom for doing that. Follow me on Twitter @JusticePutnam, and I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms, just not Facebook, at least not from me. Others could share it. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so @CookbookWest. And please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Alrighty. All right. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Eric Tucker and Ben Fox from the Associated Press. The chief executive of a massive fuel pipeline hit by ransomware last month is expected to detail his company's response to the cyber attack and to explain his decision to authorize a multi-million-dollar payment when he testifies before Congress this week. And actually, I believe I said it started today. Yes, the first one in the Senate does begin today. Colonial Pipeline CEO Joseph Blunt will face the Senate Homeland Security Committee today, Tuesday, one day. That was Monday, yesterday, after the Justice Department revealed it had recovered the majority of the $4.4 million ransom payment the company made in hopes of getting its system back online. And a second hearing is set for Wednesday before the House Homeland Security Committee. Blunt's testimony marks his first appearance before Congress since the May 7 ransomware attack that led Georgia-based Colonial Pipeline, which supplies roughly half the fuel consumed on the East Coast, to temporarily halt operations. The attack had been attributed and has been attributed to a Russia-based gang of cyber criminals using the dark side ransomware variant, one of more than 100 variants the FBI is currently investigating. It's almost like a pandemic. The company decided soon after the attack to pay the ransom of 75 Bitcoin, then valued at roughly 4.4 mil, though the FBI has historically discouraged ransomware payments for fear of encouraging cyber attacks. Colonial officials have said they saw the transaction as necessary to resume the vital fuel transport business as rapidly as possible. The operation to seize cryptocurrency paid to the Russia-based hacker group is the first of its kind to be undertaken by a specialized ransomware task force created by the Biden administration's Justice Department. It reflects a rare victory in the fight against ransomware as U.S. officials scramble to confront a rapidly accelerating threat targeting critical industries around the world. It's almost like, Captain Phillips. You got a bunch of weird pirates coming at you. What are you going to do? Negotiate with them. And when one is successful, there will be more. By going after the entire ecosystem that fuels ransomware and digital extortion attacks, including criminal proceeds in the form of digital currency, we will continue to use all of our resources to increase the cost and consequences of ransomware and other cyber-based attacks, Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco said at a news conference announcing the operation. In a statement on Monday, Blunt said he was grateful for the FBI's effort and said holding hackers accountable and disrupting their activities is the best way to deter and defend against future attacks of this nature. The private sector also has an equally important role to play, and we must continue to take cyber threats seriously and invest accordingly to harden our defenses, he added. Cryptocurrency is favored by cyber criminals because it enables direct online payments regardless of geographical location, but in this case, the FBI was able to identify a virtual currency wallet used by the hackers and recover the proceeds from there. The Justice Department did not provide details about how the FBI had obtained a key for the specific Bitcoin address, but said law enforcement had been able to track multiple transfers of the cryptocurrency. Associated Press, by way of the American Independent, brings us this next offering here on the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. The Senate's top Democrat is recommending that President Joe Biden nominate 2 prominent voting rights attorneys to serve as judges on the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals and on the federal bench in Manhattan. Senator Chuck Schumer has recommended that Joe nominate Myrna Perez, who serves as the Director of Voting Rights and Election Programs at NYU's Brennan Center for Justice, for the appeals court post. He is also recommending that Biden nominate Dale Ho, who leads the Voting Rights Project at the ACLU, as a federal judge in the